I feel so much more sophisticated when you play Bowie.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it makes me want to spawn from the sea.
Spawn in the sea. Yeah. To come from the stars and to spawn in the sea.
Spawn in the sea.
That's
there
right.
You go.
Let's do that. Malcolm, last week when we had you on, we were just starting to process what was going on in Atlanta, and now we've got another situation here in Colorado. What do you make of this? Last week, obviously, there was the incel nature of it, or the sex side of it. This guy in Colorado. What's your take on what we've seen in Colorado so far?
Well, first off, we're going to have to start learning a word which actually comes from a Black academic who coined it 20 years ago, but which has now been adopted in other roles. And that word is intersectionality.
Okay.
Intersectionality is when you're going to have to see things from other people's perspectives and see how they combine on the differing perspectives. Let's just put it that way, right?
Yeah.
In this particular instance, we had last week a white American young guy who claimed that he was highly religious, felt how can I put it, shame on his dealings at day spas, and went back and carried out retribution, so to speak, against 3 of them, including killing just patrons who were in the spa.
Right.
Yeah.
As well, but aiming most of his ire at the 6 Asian women who worked or owned these particular places. And then he got the pleasure of telling us why he did it, as opposed to having an investigation, find out why he did it. And he said that it was sexual in nature. There was a lot of speculation that he might be one of these incels, involuntary celibates. And interesting fact about incels, they do have sex from time to time. It's their contempt for the women who were involved in it, and their contempt for the ease of other people who are having sexual relations. I noted last week also that it's pretty well assumed Timothy McVeigh may be the single most famous incel that we know, because he had, even in the armed forces, no relations with women, no girlfriends, no history of sexual contact with anybody. So that gives you some perspective.
Yeah.
Fast forward to what we see here in Boulder, Colorado. We find that the individual was not white, but was actually a Muslim American, an immigrant who came to this country, who had some rather far-right extremist views, anti-gay, anti-trans, anti a lot of things, which would fit solidly down the conservative pantheon. But you also have to remember he came here at age 3. So his upbringing is 100% American. And it appears that he had a misogynistic streak in that as well. But there are a couple of factors that I think we cannot discount going into the analysis of who he was and why he did things. He did carry out some of the fundamental, how can I put it, checklist items of American domestic violent extremism. And I like to use that word. You know, I don't like to use the word domestic terrorism because, 1, we don't know if this is terrorism yet. But 2, I prefer to designate the terrorists by their nationality. So if it is terrorism, it's an American terrorist who is of XXX racial extraction, because there are African-American terrorists, there are white American terrorists, there's all kinds of terrorists. So in this particular circumstance, he was a Muslim American, came here, had some pretty conservative views, was raised in a conservative views, but he had the checklist. First, go out and buy an AR-15 rifle, right? Knowing it's high capacity as opposed to a handgun, getting it, having it for a few days before he carried this out, which usually some like to think in the gun control world that by buying a gun and giving them a day or 2 off, you have a cooling off period. That's true. And that would have worked in the circumstance of the Atlanta shooter. In this circumstance, he waited several days. His brother said that he had a mental defect. We find that a lot of these people have mental defects. And it's a question of determining the pathology, the reasoning, and his internal logic for why he did this attack. I found it very interesting. One thing very interesting is that he not only shot people as he went into the east side of the Shop King or
King Super King.
Supermarket.
King Supers, yeah.
Super King, right? And he went straight to the pharmacy and he shot people who were waiting in line for vaccines.
Yeah.
That's the one part about it, which gave us this. You notice there's a pantheon of people in their ages. There's a very high level of people who are above age 60 out of the number of victims who were killed, who were killed, and God bless them and their families. Yeah. But I found it very interesting. And I don't know whether we're going to find any writings, whether we're going to find anything that he said, comments that he may have made to his brothers and sisters. His brother came right out to the police and immediately identified himself and said, and gave them free reign of information about him. We don't know. But we do know one thing that's in common about this. He had a high capacity weapon and he had a high propensity towards violence, and he used an easy access weapon to commit violence, including killing the first police responder, the first good guy with a gun. Yeah. Was overmatched in this particular circumstance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, so that's as much as we know now.
And I felt it was interesting. Also, it kind of got overlooked a little bit on Monday, and I think I saw a tweet from you about this. That down in Texas, there was an armed man who stopped a National Guard unit that was transporting COVID vaccines, and it was just yesterday. Mm-hmm. And he said that it was he stopped them because he believed that there were women and children in the van, which gets us right back into QAnon territory.
Right, and I characterize it as QAnon. Several people ask me, "How did you know it's QAnon?" Well, if you read the article, this old guy in his 60s or 70s, I think he was 71.
Yeah,
was at a truck stop. He saw 3 National Guard vans. They were unmarked vans. They just were plain white vans. Guardsmen, they're always in their camouflage uniforms.
Right.
Guardsmen don't carry weapons in the United States for the most part. Even when they're on patrols, they generally have ammunition and weapons, but they're separated. Mm-hmm. But in this particular circumstance, they were doing a logistic run for the state of Texas to move vaccines from point A to point B. I don't think he knew that there were vaccines in those vans. According to him, he drove behind the vans several times, tried to knock the lead van off the road, drove into it. And we saw that in the attacks against the Biden bus in Texas, where they were trying to pro-Trump forces were trying to drive them off the road. He tried to drive them off the road. Finally, he blocked the lead vehicle, got him off the road, pulled a .45 caliber pistol, told them he was a detective, right? And was holding them there at gunpoint, right? And then they called the police. They did the right protocol. They called the police. Police came, and he told them he saw them kidnapping women and children at the truck stop, and he thought they were human traffickers. That is pure heart of QAnon. Yeah. The deep state kidnapping children, trafficking in women in order to take their blood for the Jews and to get the fake medicine adrenochrome out of them by killing them while they're alive. And I just found it very fascinating that when I did that tweet, several people came out and said they never mentioned QAnon in the story. People need to get boned up on what QAnon is.
Yeah.
Because the whole story was his claim that he was, another mentally defective person, unstable, but carrying weapons, drew weapons down on these people in order to effect a hero's rescue. Where have we seen that? Pizzagate.
Yep.
Armed gunmen going into the pizza parlor claiming there are secret child sex dungeons run by Hillary Clinton in the basement, and it's built on a slab.
Yeah.
There were no dungeons. And you have idiots like Jack Posobiec from OAN News, the disgraced Navy urinalysis officer who was kicked out because he went there with a video camera and exploded that lie that led to an armed hostage barricade in Washington, D.C.
Yeah. And correct me on this. Was Pizzagate before QAnon became a thing?
Pizzagate was, yes. It was just as before QAnon really came out.
But Q was able to feed on that because it involved,
so to speak,
child sex trafficking.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, these are
the core of QAnon.
I'm writing this new book on right-wing extremism and the coming Trump insurgency. And these are very old myths. These are very old tropes.
Yeah.
The entire blood libel, taking blood from Christian children, goes back to the medieval era, and it was part of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion fraud, which led to the extermination of the Jews in World War II as a common Nazi theme. All the neo-Nazis of the 60s, 70s, and even now say the same thing. QAnon is nothing but a crazy person who has managed to harness and create an umbrella for all the other crazies. Now, even gun worshipers. So we're all of this is very dangerous material to the people of the United States.
Yeah.
And also, because we're talking about extremists, I want to talk about this morning, Kyle Cheney with Politico is reporting that prosecutors have revealed that communications between the Oath Keepers and members of the Proud Boys and other militia groups showing that they believe that former President Donald Trump was going to invoke the Insurrection Act, which they believe gave them permission to go into Congress and stop the vote. That's some new reporting this morning. What are your thoughts on that?
I conjectured that way back in January. I think that these people acted as if they had permission, and numerous of the couple of hundred people that they've arrested thus far have invoked the fact that they were operating on Donald Trump's orders. When you read these indictments, read the indictments. Don't just look at the news story. The indictments are fascinating, and they give you very, very deep hints and how they collected the intelligence. And, I'm an old NSA guy. Nothing I like better than watching their internal communications with each other. The Proud Boys are neck deep in sedition. They weren't even at the rally. They were up on the Hill. Groups of them were on Capitol Hill. They had multiple groups planning to storm the building. They had organized themselves into that, and they knew that people power was going to get them through those front doors.
Yeah.
And this is where I said we may find evidence of what I projected on the day of the attack, capture and kill teams, or what we call murder cells, that they in fact may have felt that they were deputized by the president. All that's going to do is link them to Roger Stone and Donald Trump and help us expand the sedition. It's really their internal communications, excuse me, showing them, telling each other, you go with this group here, you go with this group here, stand by on this place, switch over to this, having internal encrypted communications channels. They were hiding from the FBI after Brendan Tarrio had been arrested the night before. I mean, these guys were organizing like a military operation. And if there is a God at the end of this, there won't be a Proud Boys. They will have arrested most of the national leaders. But sedition is absolutely in their future.
And I also hear sedition being thrown about for the Oath Keepers people too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
All of these groups there, and it's interesting. Now, I want to point out one thing. You guys have noticed we haven't talked about the Boogaloo Boys. Right. Well, there are hundreds of them there also. But they're just more, the average guy that just got busted. Cops, where they're found numerous weapons in there, a lot of the weapons that they had arrested people with the night before and the day after haven't been brought to light. When I say weapons, I mean firearms. Right? I personally identify at least one firearm that we saw on video. A guy was concealing a SIG pistol on his body. So there were firearms up there, but there are numerous people that are going to fall under this umbrella. And you're going to find, as we go through time, they're going to the high-profile ones that they have real solid evidence against for, not just insurrection, but solid sedition and conspiracy out the wazoo to attack American democracy and bring down the democracy and install a dictatorship.
Do you think any of these charges will result in convictions?
Oh, they're all going to result in convictions.
Okay. That gives me hope, because a lot of times you see, charges thrown out there and nothing happens. I want convictions for this.
But we also don't have
if you explain the basic law and said if you entered the building grounds and went there through benefit of violence, well, there's 3 charges right there. All they got to do is play your video or show your Facebook photo or show the surveillance photo and explain that your cell phone was inside the geo fence that the FBI put around the building, and they're going to go, and they admitted it when brought in and are asking for leniency. Well, conviction. It's it's my beloved wife once had to sit a grand jury in Washington, D.C. And she was on the murder grand jury. Oh. And she said, once things were explained to you clearly what the law was, most of the time it took virtually nothing to hand down an indictment from a grand jury. And conviction was assured in most instances.
Okay.
It's only in those few ones where you could really create benefit of doubt. In many of these, there's no benefit of doubt because they're there with their phone going, I attacked democracy, yo.
Yeah.
And it's like,
that was their slip up.
Well, yeah. I was under orders from Donald Trump. Immaterial.
Uh-huh. Okay.
Thank you for convicting yourself.
Yeah.
One last one I want to ask before we go, because we're running along
Sure.
with you. Did you see the interview on 60 Minutes on Sunday with this U.S. Attorney Michael Sherwin?
Yes, I did.
Have you seen the reporting that's come out since that the judge in the case is upset about it, and he's asking what's going on? This guy, Michael Sherwin, let's just point out, he was promoted by Bill Barr from a Miami office to serve the Justice Department. He did the interview on the way out the door, and apparently the interview was not cleared with Maine Justice on the way out the door to go back to Miami, which is also where Donald Trump happens to be living. What do you think about what's going on there?
I just think I think he's a straight shooter. I think he overshot. He didn't seem to have any hesitation in bringing indictments against any of these people. I don't think he's a Trump acolyte. I think he when Bill Barr left in December, a lot of these attorneys are like, hey, we're going to do our job for once. And he did this thing. If you watch the questioning on 60 Minutes, he sort of got caught up in the question. And, where he's just like, yeah, I got to give an answer to that. And he just thought, well, I'm out. I can do that. I don't think that will impact any of the indictments that are coming down. He's out of office.
Yeah.
All right. Good.
Malcolm.
All right, glad to hear that.
You're awesome.
You didn't ask me about guns, so I'm actually shocked.
Well, we talked about that at the beginning of it a little bit with the shooter in Colorado and the shooter in Atlanta.
Yeah.
All right.
All right.
Malcolm, thank you so much. Appreciate you being here. And
and Mama will be back next week. So
yes.
All right.
Yeah.
Well, it's good to have a sober conversation.
All right.
Thanks,
Malcolm.
All right. Take care. Bye-bye, guys.
Good morning, dear.
Oh, cut!
We have a lot to celebrate this week.
You have the right to remain tripping your balls off.
It's like Illuminati, but with leather.
First day at Fight Club, you must fight!
2020 refuses to concede.
I was going to have to return 2021 because I didn't like the 7-day trial. But I'm in now. We're in, sexy liberals.
Ow.